session at Graduate Guru. We'll continue with our topic final accounts of banking companies. But in this session, we are going to calculate a ratio which is required to be maintained by banking companies. So that ratio is called your capital adequacy ratio or CAR in short. Now when we talk about capital adequacy, adequate means enough. So ये ratio check करता है if the capital of the bank is enough to cover what? To cover the risks associated with its assets. So जब हम assets की बात करते हैं, there are certain assets which are risky. We feel कि हमें ये पैसे मिलेंगे, which we call our asset. But there is a likelihood that that money will never come to us. So these kind of risks are associated with your assets और बैंक में ये risks बढ़ जाती है because as we know there are so many frauds that take place where people take loans from banks and they don't return those loans back, right? They declare themselves as bankrupt और फिर बैंक वो amount collect नहीं कर सकती है. So this is just one example of a risk of a bank's asset. So ऐसे risks cover करने के लिए your capital has to be very strong. क्योंकि अगर आपका capital enough नहीं है, adequate नहीं है, तो जब ऐसे कोई assets irrecoverable हो जाते हैं, उसका direct effect होता है on the normal functioning of the bank and sometimes the bank has to close down. अगर उनके major assets risky assets हैं, जो उन्होंने recover नहीं किए हैं, then the genuine clients, the customers of the bank will also lose their money in the process. So that is why the government has declared a certain percentage which the bank has to maintain as its capital adequacy ratio. So this ratio has been given by the International Basel Committee. So they have come up with this concept of CAR, that is capital adequacy ratio. ये एक international concept है. Even international banks have to maintain this kind of a ratio. So what this ratio is, how we calculate it, that is what we are going to study. So in our country just now, the requirement of this ratio is 9%. So हम जो भी calculate करेंगे, that is the ratio which I'll show you how it has to be calculated, वो ratio has to be at least 9%. अगर 9% से कम है, that means the bank is not satisfying this criteria and then it has to juggle its funds. So उनको funds यहाँ से वहाँ transfer करने पड़ेंगे so that they maintain this 9% which is the requirement of the ratio. So this is one number which you have to remember. This number keeps on changing. So I am telling you as of date क्या number है. But RBI will come out with some new notification and this ratio can change at any time. So you have to keep yourself updated about this ratio also. Now how are we going to calculate this ratio? So the ratio says total capital funds upon risk-weighted assets plus off-balance sheet items. What are these things? These individual amounts also have some calculations which we are coming to step by step. Into 100 because हम percentage calculate कर रहे हैं. If we directly do this, we'll get 0 point something which we don't want. We'll multiply by 100 and we'll always write our ratio as a percentage. So total capital funds में क्या include करना है? Risk weighted assets क्या है? What are the off balance sheet items which we are going to include here? And how are we going to calculate this ratio? So we are going to study all of this step by step. First, I want you to write down this formula most importantly और ये number जो अभी के लिए is valid 9%. So take this down and then we'll go ahead with how to calculate this ratio. So as I said, for each item in our ratio, that is in this formula that we wrote, we will have some calculations to do. So पहले total capital fund में there are two types of capital which are defined for a banking company, which is tier 1 capital and tier 2 capital. Tier 1 capital is the highest level of capital. It is more permanent in nature. It doesn't change from time to time. So ये काफी time तक company के balance sheet में रहता है, that is banking company के balance sheet में. This capital is almost permanent capital. It is also called your core capital. Core is very very important. So इस capital के बिना banking company exist नहीं कर सकती है. So that's why it is your core capital and it most readily covers your risks. So this capital, if majority of your capital is this type, तो हमारा काफी risk covered हो जाता है, because this capital is non-risky capital. So इस capital को अगर हम risk weighted assets से compare करें, तो this capital will help us to absorb those risks very easily. So this is about tier 1 capital. Tier 2 capital is a lower level capital. Okay, so this is lower absorbing capacity for risks. So इस capital में risk absorbing power कम होता है as compared to tier 1. It's not कि ये risks absorb नहीं कर सकेगा, but this capital is not as permanent, it is not as important as the tier 1 capital. This is because it is less permanent in nature. So ये capital throughout the life of the bank उनके balance sheet में नहीं रहेगा. This is capital which you have to pay out. Okay, so इसका repayment कर देना पड़ता है in a certain number of years. But tier 1, as I said, is permanent in nature. This will remain in the balance sheet till the end of the banking company's life. So this is the difference between tier 1 and tier 2 capital. अब tier 1 में कौन सी चीजें हम include करेंगे and tier 2 में क्या include करेंगे, that I'll tell you in a while. First, copy this much down. So this is what we include in tier 1 and tier 2 capital. So let us understand each item individually. So सबसे पहले tier 1 में we start with the paid up equity capital. This is the most permanent capital for any company, right? So ये हमेशा tier 1 capital में आ जाएगा, the full paid up capital, not the subscribed or the issued, but the paid up capital. Then you add your statutory reserves. हमने already देख लिया है what is the statutory reserve. हर बैंक को एक reserve maintain करना पड़ता है from time to time and they have to have a fixed amount in that statutory reserve all the time. So वो add हो जाएगा. Then you add the disclosed free reserves. What are free reserves? Those reserves which are easily usable anywhere. प्लस जिनसे हम इजीली डिविडेंड पे कर सके, दोज बिकम आर फ्री रिजर्व्स. इन पर कोई रिस्ट्रिक्शन नहीं होता है फॉर देयर यूज. सो अगर बैलेंस शीट में वो फ्री रिजर्व दिखाया है, नॉट हिडन रिजर्व. सी बैंक्स हैव सर्टेन हिडन रिजर्व्स आल्सो, जो वो बैलेंस शीट में नहीं दिखाते हैं, बट दे क्रिएट एंड मेंटेन दैट काइंड ऑफ रिजर्व. सो ऐसे अनडिस्क्लोज्ड रिजर्व्स यहाँ पर नहीं आएंगे. हियर वी विल हैव ओनली डिस्क्लोज्ड फ्री रिजर्व्स. Then perpetual non-cumulative preference capital. Let us break this down and understand. पहले let us understand non-cumulative. Preference shares में there are two types. One is cumulative, one is non-cumulative. Cumulative means अगर एक साल में हमने dividend उनको pay नहीं किया, then it will get added to the next year's dividend. So next year में हमें 2 बार dividend pay करना पड़ेगा. That is double the dividend. But if it is non-cumulative, अगर एक साल में डिविडेंड पे नहीं हो सका, देन दे हैव टू फॉरगो, दैट इज सरेंडर दैट डिविडेंड, वो डिविडेंड उन्हें नेक्स्ट ईयर में नहीं मिलेगा. सो दैट इज नॉन क्यूमुलेटिव. नाउ परपेचुअल, परपेचुअल का मीनिंग है फॉर एवर. सो जो प्रेफरेंस शेयर्स आर फॉर एवर, दैट इज उनकी एक रिडेम्पशन डेट फिक्स्ड नहीं है. सी प्रेफरेंस शेयर्स यू हैव टू रिडीम एट सम पॉइंट और द अदर, पर when the date for redemption is not fixed, then they will be called perpetual. So ऐसे perpetual non-cumulative preference shares जो हैं, that comes under tier 1 capital because they are almost similar to equity shares. Then we have innovative perpetual again debt instruments. Debt instruments means debentures, bonds या कुछ अलग तरह की सिक्योरिटीज जो बैंक ने इन इश्यू की है इन द मार्केट. इनोवेटिव, एनी न्यू टाइप ऑफ सिक्योरिटी. परपेचुअल अगेन जिनकी रिडेम्पशन डेट फिक्स्ड नहीं है. सो इनोवेटिव परपेचुअल डेट इंस्ट्रूमेंट्स विल ऑल्सो कम हियर. कैपिटल रिजर्व, यहां पर वी सॉ फ्री रिजर्व्स. कैपिटल रिजर्व इज नॉट फ्री. फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल यू कैन नॉट यूज कैपिटल रिजर्व फॉर एवरीथिंग. हम इससे डिविडेंड नहीं डिक्लेयर कर सकते, हम इसे अलग रीडेवलपमेंट वगैरह में यूज नहीं कर सकते. सो कैपिटल रिजर्व हैज रिस्ट्रिक्टेड यूज, सो इट इज नॉट अ फ्री रिजर्व, बट स्टिल इट कैन बी इंक्लूडेड इन टियर 1 कैपिटल अगर ये कैपिटल रिजर्व वाज क्रिएटेड बिकॉज ऑफ सेल ऑफ एसेट्स. फॉर एनी अदर रीजन यू विल नॉट इंक्लूड इट हियर. सेल ऑफ एसेट्स पे जो कैपिटल रिजर्व आपने क्रिएट किया है, दैट विल कम इन टियर 1 कैपिटल. Then you will subtract these three things. यहाँ तक हम सब ऐड कर रहे थे. Now we go to subtraction. So first we subtract all our intangible assets. We know what are intangible assets: goodwill, patents, trademarks, जिनका कोई physical form नहीं है. So that will be subtracted. You will also subtract all your losses. अगर आपके बैलेंस शीट में P&L अकाउंट से नेगेटिव फिगर है, तो that is a loss. So ऐसे losses को भी हम subtract कर देंगे from our capital because these losses are to be absorbed by the equity shareholders. So you subtract that and finally you subtract your deferred tax assets. ऐसे जो हम tax assets create करते हैं for the tax which you have paid in this year, पर उसका इफेक्ट, उसका क्रेडिट आपको टैक्स के डिपार्टमेंट से फ्यूचर ईयर्स में मिलेगा. सो ऐसे टैक्स के जो हम एसेट्स क्रिएट करते हैं, दैट विल ऑल्सो बी सब्ट्रैक्टेड बिकॉज दीज आर नॉट एक्चुअल एसेट्स. ये नेक्स्ट ईयर में रिवर्स हो जाएंगे. सो दिस इज हाउ वी कैलकुलेट टियर 1 कैपिटल. नाउ व्हेन वी गो टू टियर 2, टियर 1 में जो इंक्लूडेड नहीं है बेसिकली दैट गेट्स इंक्लूडेड इन टियर 2. सो टियर 2 में पहले अनडिस्क्लोज्ड रिजर्व्स. टियर 1 में वी सॉ कि डिस्क्लोज्ड रिजर्व्स लेने हैं. टियर 2 में यू विल टेक द हिडन रिजर्व्स जो बैलेंस शीट में नहीं दिखाए हैं. देन यू ऐड योर क्यूमुलेटिव परपेचुअल प्रेफरेंस कैपिटल. यहां पर नॉन क्यूमुलेटिव था, यहां पर यू आर टेकिंग द क्यूमुलेटिव परपेचुअल प्रेफरेंस कैपिटल. देन कैपिटल रिजर्व, इवन टियर 1 में हमने देखा कैपिटल रिजर्व, but here capital reserve only on sale of assets. जबकि tier 2 में I can take capital reserve on revaluation of assets. So हमने सिर्फ book entry की है where suppose हमारे land की value बढ़ गई है. So then we created that reserve to book that profit. हमें actual वो profit मिला नहीं है in cash, but it's just by a book entry that this profit has been created. So ऐसे जो प्रॉफिट्स हैं, ऐसे जो रिजर्व्स हैं, दैट वी विल टेक टू टियर 2. पर यहाँ पर आई विल अप्लाई अ डिस्काउंट ऑफ 55%. सो सपोज कैपिटल रिजर्व ऑन रिवैल्यूएशन इज से 100 lakhs, उससे हम 55% माइनस कर देंगे. सो वी विल टेक ओनली 45%. सो 55% ऑफ 10 lakhs सेज 5,50,000, वो माइनस करके हम 4,50,000 की ही वैल्यू टियर 2 कैपिटल में इंक्लूड करेंगे. देन प्रोविजंस एंड रिजर्व्स फॉर लॉसेस. दीज आर नॉट नॉर्मल रिजर्व्स. इसे रिजर्व्स के साथ मिक्स नहीं करना है. दीज आर प्रोविजंस विच वी क्रिएट लाइक फॉर बैड डेट्स, डेप्रिसिएशन प्रोविजन. ये सारे प्रोविजंस हो गए हमारे फॉर लॉसेस. तो यहाँ पर भी there is a restriction up to 1.25% of risk weighted assets. So we will see हम risk weighted assets कैसे calculate करते हैं. उसका 1.25% ही allowed है as a provision, जो हम tier 2 में include कर सकते हैं. Then subordinate debt. यहाँ पर we saw innovative debt instruments. इसके अलावा that is anything lower grade debt instruments जो होते हैं, जो हमारे normal debt instruments होते हैं, they are secondary debt instruments. So वैसे instruments are also allowed to be included here, but up to 50% of tier 1. So ये restriction है again. Then you add your investment fluctuation reserve. Banks का majority income other than the interest that they earn is from investment income. So investment income में, because investments की market value keeps on changing, so they create a fluctuation reserve to cover the loss because of a fall in the market value of the investments. So ऐसे जो investment fluctuation reserve हैं, again restricted to 1.25% of risk weighted assets. So both of these are restricted to this amount. Then you subtract your investments in subsidiaries. Subsidiaries means जो हमारी subsidiary companies है, where the bank owns more than 50% capital, वो हो जाएगी subsidiary for the bank. So subsidiary में जो हमने investment किया है, उनके जो shares हमने खरीदे हैं, उसकी value you will subtract up to 50%. So जो भी हमारी investment की value है, उसका 50% we will subtract. And you will also subtract your credit enhancement. Credit enhancement are special type of securities which the bank creates for covering the risks associated with their credit instruments. जो वो loans वगैरह देते हैं, उसका risk calculate करके on that they create this special feature credit enhancement. Again that amount you will take at 50% and subtract it from your tier 2 items. So this is how you calculate your tier 1 and tier 2 capital. इन दोनों का total goes to our total capital fund. So this is very important. हमें ये calculation के लिए we should know tier 1 में क्या जाएगा, tier 2 में क्या जाएगा. Now what is the restriction? Tier 2 cannot be more than tier 1. So जब भी हम calculations करेंगे in our sums, first we will always calculate tier 1. और फिर जब हम tier 2 calculate करेंगे, you have to be careful कि tier 2 का amount tier 1 के amount से ज़्यादा नहीं होना चाहिए. If it is more, तो हम उसे restrict कर देंगे. And we will take only that much amount जितना tier 1 का amount है. So this is something you have to remember. Take this down first, then we'll go ahead. Now for the calculation of risk-weighted assets and off-balance sheet items. Risk-weighted assets means हम assets पर एक weight लगा देंगे. That is, we will multiply it with a certain percentage depending on वो asset कितना risky है. So here I have made a list of the assets which are generally there in the balance sheet of the banks. And we will see what is the percentage of risk. So obviously you are going to multiply the book value जो already accounts में दिख रही है, that value will be multiplied with the percentage of risk and that is what will give you the risk weighted values. Now the first one is cash and balance with RBI. जो हमारे पास cash balance है, that is the most non-risky. हमारे पास जो cash है उसकी value कभी change नहीं होगी. So there is zero risk in that. RBI के पास भी जो बैंक का बैलेंस है, that is also safe because it is in government hands. RBI is a government type of an organization. So there is complete safety. अगर asset fully safe है, तो you are going to take 0% as your risk value. So cash and balance with RBI के लिए it is 0%. Now balance with other banks या claims on banks. So जो हमें किसी और बैंक से अमाउंट कलेक्ट करना है, या तो हमारे अकाउंट्स है उस बैंक में, या वी हैव गिवन अ लोन और एन एडवांस टू दैट बैंक एंड वी हैव टू कलेक्ट इट फ्रॉम देम. When the matter is about other banks, there is slight risk. So इस कैटेगरी के लिए the risk associated is 20%. It's a lower risk because ये जो banks हैं eventually they will have kept their money with RBI. So it is easier to collect this money than any other money. So that is why इसके लिए भी risk factor कम है, 20% है. It is not 0%. क्योंकि completely safe नहीं है, but the risk is less. Then we have investment in government securities or investment guaranteed by the government. Again, whenever you have any amount which is related to government, it is completely safe. So again, whenever you have government involved, 0% risk because the money is completely safe. Then we have other investments. Other investments means इन investments को छोड़ के और जो भी बाकी के investments हैं, those become risky because you don't know if there is a guarantee of getting that money or not. So that is why इसके लिए risk will be full 100%. So पूरा 100% का risk है for these type of assets. Then we have loans and advances guaranteed by the government or PSUs, जो हमने loans या advance किसी को दिए हैं, but the government या public sector undertakings again owned by government only. So indirectly government is again involved. Again government involvement, so risk is 0. So our risk weight will become 0%. Then other loans and advances, जैसे investment में जो government वाले थे 0, बट अदर्स में 100, वैसे ही लोन्स एंड एडवांसेस में भी जो गवर्नमेंट गारंटीड है 0 रिस्क, पर अदर्स जो है उसमें 100% रिस्क है. सो यू विल टेक 100%. देन प्रीमाइसेस, फर्नीचर, जो भी हमारे दूसरे एसेट्स हैं अदर देन इन्वेस्टमेंट्स या लोन्स एंड एडवांसेस, अगेन फुल 100% रिस्क. Then we have our off balance sheet items, जैसे हमारे acceptances हो गए, guarantees हो गई, हमने किसी के लिए guarantee दी है, if that person doesn't pay the amount तो वो हमारी liability बन जाएगी. So these are basically those items which you show in contingent liabilities. Again 100% risk for this also. And finally non-funded exposure to real estate. रियल एस्टेट मीन्स जो हम लैंड या प्लॉट्स में इन्वेस्ट करते हैं. सो बैंक्स की ऐसी बहुत सारी इन्वेस्टमेंट्स होती हैं एंड इट इज नॉन फंडेड, मीन्स देयर इज नो गवर्नमेंट बैकिंग फॉर इट. सो अगेन दीज आर ऑल्सो अंडर द 100% कैटेगरी. सो हम ऐसा टेबल हमेशा बनाएंगे फॉर कैलकुलेटिंग आवर रिस्क वेटेड एसेट्स. सो यहाँ पर वी विल राइट द बुक वैल्यूज जो हमें दी होंगी इन द सम. We will multiply it with the percentage and those amounts will come under our risk weighted values. So basically this is nothing but book value into the risk weight. And then when we take the total of this last column, what we will get is the risk weighted assets, which includes the off balance sheet items also, and that we will take as our denominator. So we have seen what we take for the numerator, we've seen what we take for the denominator also. Quickly take this also down. So I hope you've taken this down. Sums based on this we'll be doing in the next session, but in the meanwhile take down a homework question which is question number 15. I'll just quickly read it. It is similar to the question which we have done earlier, जहाँ पर you have to make both balance sheet and profit and loss account. So following is the trial balance of Apna Bank Limited as on 31st March 2020. Debit balances में we have audit fees, bank premises, bills discounted, balance with RBI, balance with other banks, directors' fees, sundry expenses, Government securities, which is nothing but our investment. Income tax paid दिया है. If you remember, हमने एक sum किया था where we compared the provision with the income tax paid और net amount का effect हम देंगे balance sheet में. Interim dividend paid, this is an appropriation. Interest on deposits and borrowings, ये debit balance है, that means we are paying this interest, it's our expense. State government bonds, again ये investment हो जाएगा. Loss on sale of investments, even though it's a loss, आप इसे other income में बताएंगे. Money at call and short notice, you know where that goes. Provident fund contribution, this will be an expense for the company, that is the bank. Salaries and allowances, investments in companies, printing and stationery, loans, cash credits and overdrafts. Share capital दिया है and they've said that they are ordinary shares. Ordinary means equity shares of ₹100 each. Brokerage and commission. Current accounts, you know this comes under your deposits. Contingency accounts. This is not contingent liability. मैंने एक sum में आपको ये बताया है where it goes. Interest and discount credit side पे है तो it's our income. Investment fluctuation reserve which will go to reserves. Profit on sale of gold. P&L account opening balance दिया है. Borrowings from other banks. Savings bank account and reserve fund which is invested in state government bonds. This is nothing but your statutory reserve. And then there is some adjustments which says interest accrued on investments was 5625. Bills discounted shall mature on 20th May including grace period and discount rate is given. So हमें rebate calculate करके उसका adjustment करना है. During the year premises worth 7,500 were purchased. Depreciation is to be provided on opening balance at 5%. Provide 40% of net profit for tax. ये provision for tax का adjustment है. Out of loans and advances, so much are secured. So ये disclosure के लिए दिया है. And so much are guaranteed by the directors. And bills for collection were 13,500. So this very similar sum हमने पहले किया है. So go through that sum and then solve this sum by yourself. So I wind up this session over here. In the next session, we'll be doing some sums on CAR. Thank you.